Time for us to talk about our main event of the evening, and we are going to the middleweight division. Israel Adesanya, our reigning champion, he makes his latest defense, and he's taking on the 38-year-old killer gorilla, Jared Cannonier, currently ranked number 2 in the weight class. Betting odds for this one, you can get Adesanya at -365, so this is some of his widest odds as champion. Jared Cannonier, the big underdog here, plus 300. Now, Adesanya has been UFC champion since UFC 243, and he's starting to enter the sort of dynasty champion phase in the same way that sort of like an Anderson Silva or John Jones or GSP do, where it's sort of like turning back contenders, holds the belt for a long time. Now, middleweight has had a lack of title contenders recently. I personally think it's certainly not as star-studded as it was, say, a few years ago. Are the UFC doing enough to market potential title challenges?
No. I feel like that's a running theme when it comes to the UFC. Are they doing well enough to market this? No. Sadly, but I think at least like they're gonna market Pajeda if he wins.
Yeah, big time. And I think I think the UFC mentally have already got it in their head that Adesanya versus Pereira is going to happen, and this is just like a foregone conclusion, both of their fights. And I think that's a real shame on Jared Cannonier, because I will say, like, Jared Cannonier, I think he's 6-2 as a middleweight fighter. Fought at heavyweight, so you've got that intrigue behind him, that he's carried this heavyweight power down to 185. But I just sort of get the feeling he's sort of a proper bit part player in this. Like, I'm personally very biased towards it, so it's part of the reason why it comes to mind for me. It kind of reminds me when Raquel Pennington got her bantamweight title shot. So it was a bit like, there's not really anyone else. She's got a bit of a good winning streak. She's quite highly ranked. What the hell? We'll just give her a shot. That's kind of how I feel the UFC are treating Cannonier.
That sounds that actually hits me just right. I think that sounds accurate. I do think there's one big difference, though. I think Cannonier has a bigger chance in this fight than people want to admit.
Jared Cannonier is a very good fighter, and we'll go into a bit of a deep dive on him here. So as mentioned before, pretty decent record since he went down to middleweight. Notable wins include Anderson Silva, Jack Manson, Kelvin Gastelum, and most recently Derek Brunson at UFC 271. And I think that fight sort of encapsulates the sort of middleweight run of Jared Cannonier. Starts a little bit slowly, a bit vulnerable when it comes to grappling heavy fighters, but he's able to adjust, he's able to recover, and eventually power through to get a brutal stoppage win. Like, I personally thought Derek Brunson was going to win that fight, and I was impressed by Cannonier that he was able to overcome the grappling.
I picked Cannonier to win, and after the end of the first round, I thought, I just made a terrible mistake. And then he made me look good because I was right somehow. He looked great, though, in that second round at least.
Yeah. What, in your opinion, are the big strengths when it comes to Jared Cannonier?
Against any opponent, it's his incredible power. He seems to fight very well when fighting southpaw or orthodox. He's pretty durable. He took a couple of flush head kicks from my man Robert Whittaker. It just kind of went, oh, that sucks, until like the last one knocked him down. And he's almost always ready to just kind of let it all hang out. Also, he makes good adjustments. Actually, I didn't think about this. He makes really good adjustments. He was kind of setting up Hermanson to duck low, and then he set up the uppercut for the finish. Against the Brunson fight, obviously he lost the first round, made a slight adjustment in when he was, or in what kind of shots he was throwing, and then he got the finish. But lastly, and this is the most important one for this fight, is he has incredible power in his low kicks.
Yes. And they caused Jack Manson a truckload of problems when they fought in that Copenhagen card.
Oh, yeah. And then Anderson Silva, I know people that say, it was just a freak injury. No, that was a loss by low kicks. He got finished by low kicks. That wasn't any injury.
And I think when you've got a sort of movement-based fighter like Adesanya, I think that's one thing that you need to do. You need to slow down his movement. But I think also you need to check his kicks, because one of the big reasons Adesanya lost against Jan Blachowicz, yes, obviously there was a big size difference between the two, and I don't think Adesanya bulked up as much for that fight as he maybe should have done. But an overlooked part of it is Jan Blachowicz is a hell of a good checker of kicks. And that took away one of Adesanya's biggest weapons. So Cannonier is going to need to dish out the kicks, but he's also going to need to make sure Izzy doesn't do the same thing.
It's a two-way street. There's two really simple rules in striking is you have to kick the kicker. Chad Mendes took away the kicks of Jose Aldo in their second fight by throwing kicks at him. And so that's one of the big rules in it. And Adesanya, I'm sure he's aware, is you don't throw hooks against the guy who throws hooks too. And Cannonier has the big hooks. So it's kind of interesting in the striking, more so than most people want to give it credit to.
Well, let's talk about Adesanya here. As mentioned before, unbeaten as a middleweight. So this is 22 fights as a middleweight, unbeaten. His only loss came at light heavyweight against Jan Blachowicz. Notable wins during this time include 2 wins over Robert Whittaker, 2 wins over Marvin Vettori, Paulo Costa, Yoel Romero, Kelvin Gastelum, Anderson Silva, as mentioned there, and Derek Brunson. What can you say when it comes to this guy? So Adesanya, probably up there as probably one of the best kickboxers in the UFC right now. Some people make an argument potentially one of the pound-for-pound fighters in the world. But we have seen a very different Adesanya between how he was on the way up and what we've seen as champion. Like, we often use this joke, like Tim Sylvia is one of the big ones that comes to mind, where winning the belt changes a fighter, and instead of fighting to win, they fight not to lose. Could you maybe make that argument Adesanya started to do the same thing?
I think there is an argument there, but I think what the counterpoint to it is the Costa fight.
Yeah, it was fantastic in that match.
I picked Costa to win, and I have not looked dumber, I think, because he just made it look so easy. Just a very thorough dismantling of his entire game. But lately, it does seem like that. He didn't take any risks against Vettori, and he was outclassing Vettori, but he just didn't take any risks, which kind of gives you that Shevchenko kind of vibes, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago. But the big one was the Robert Whittaker rematch, which I expected a really good fight, and it was good. Just, I don't know. He's a little different. I don't know if he's slowing down or if it's a mentality thing, but I personally scored it for Rob in the last fight. That's potentially incredible bias, I'm willing to admit. I'm a big Whittaker fan. But I don't know. So it does seem like he is like just, very risk-free, just happy to get this decision win and call it a day.
Do you think maybe he has been fighting guys recently who do have somewhat of a grappling base? Like Whittaker did wrestle, I think he tried to become a Commonwealth wrestler before he got into MMA. Marvin Vettori, of course, has a grappling base as well. Do you think maybe the fact that he's facing a guy in Cannonier who doesn't have that same sort of base, do you think we could maybe see Adesanya opening up a little bit? Because there's no threat of a takedown?
That's actually a good point, because the 3 guys he's had performances against is Romero, Vettori, and Whittaker. And then the one guy he's looked just incredible against is in his title. Yeah, is in his title defenses, and it's, almost in a sense his clone. And the body kicks instead of low kicks version, of each other.
What is it, in your opinion, that's made Adesanya as dominant as he has? What have you seen in his skill set that makes you think that's how he wins fights?
He's the smoothest fighter I've ever seen, probably. I think Shevchenko is pretty smooth and pretty dominant. How Izzy moves is on another level. It seems like he lightly hits you, even though he has perfect fluid motion. There's no any excess movement in it. It just connects and it's out. Kind of whenever at least when he was coming up. His striking is just very, very good. He's at least the top 2 striker in the world. There's no question about that, I think.
When it comes to smooth fighters, I'm surprised you didn't mention Benson Henderson.
Oh,
smooth Benson Henderson.
He's number 1 because of it. The toothpick doesn't lie.
We have seen Adesanya face some adversity earlier in his career. We mentioned before the Jan Blachowicz fight. And we mentioned, and also as well, Kelvin Gastelum gave him a lot of problems in their interim title fight, which is up there as one of the best of all time. What did they exploit in their two performances that Cannonier can look at and think, that's my go-to?
The two big ones I thought were the threat of the takedown led his hands to be low. His hands have always been low, even in kickboxing. Izzy's hands have always been kind of like here. But he's quick with his head movements. If you're leaning back, it's a little harder to stop a takedown. So like guys like Kelvin Gastelum who can just jump on your legs. The threat with the head kicks took away his head movement. The big left hands kind of hurt. Whenever he wants to stuff a takedown, it was kind of that triple threat from those two guys that kind of helped slow him down. And unless Cannonier is just gonna, has been double legging everybody in this, it's gonna be really hard for him to kind of create that triple threat of the high kicks, punches, and takedowns.
I think stylistically, and a lot of this you can say in hindsight, stylistically, Kelvin was a tough matchup for Izzy. Like, being the smaller man, we know that Kelvin has a hell of a chin. And Kelvin relied on that a little bit. He was just like, I'm willing to take some shots to get on the inside. And of course, Kelvin has some of the fastest, powerful hands in the middleweight division. So, like, you could say Cannonier, just copy and paste the same strategy. But I don't think Cannonier has the chin to do that. And he doesn't have the hand speed.
No. Gastelum, because he had like a rough run, people forget how good he actually is. They've never given him an easy fight at middleweight, basically. And I thought him in the Izzy fight was a draw. That's how I've been scoring it these last 3 times I've watched it. And you can't just emulate that. There's no copy paste here for that. That's that guy's whole shtick. And Whittaker can kind of emulate it. But it's a little bit different from both guys.
Well, Whittaker tried doing that big time against Adesanya the first time around, and we saw how that ended up.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was burnout, though. I do think the burnout overtraining story has some validity to it.
Someone said something which I kind of see where they're coming from when it comes to Cannonier. Basically, Jared Cannonier can win this fight. But he can't fight like Cannonier if he wants to do it. Like, if he just goes in there and fights the same way he did against Hermansson, Derek Brunson, that sort of quintessential cut and paste Cannonier performance, he's going to piece him apart. But if he's able to adapt and especially take away the leg kicks, he has got a shot. He can cause Adesanya problems.
I think he has to do that. I think he has to go in there with check his kicks, be patient, and just slowly wear down those legs. And then by round 3, if you've done enough damage, which he can do with his low kicks, he should be an easier target for you to land a bomb on. But that's easier said than done.
Definitely. So. We've talked earlier in the show about about Alex Pereira versus Sean Strickland, and potentially the winner of that one facing Adesanya for the title after this. What do we do if Cannonier wins? Does that fight still happen, or do they run the Adesanya rematch back?
If he starches Izzy to where there's no controversy, there's no question, 5-round drubbing, a Usman Tyron Woodley kind of situation, then there is no rematch, obviously, in a situation like that. But if he just catches him, even I think in the first couple minutes, I could see the UFC kind of playing it up like a fluke. Like, well, can he do it again? And then they rematch it. And then here we are with Sean Strickland Pereira fighting Robert Whittaker as Whittaker kills off another top contender.